Alright, welcome to this guide. I'm building the Ultimate Phoenix Lightning Sorceress. Unlike some of the other guides, I'm going to go through the gear and the stats in quite a bit of detail and just talk about why I made each selection that I did. I'm also going to talk about the some of the gear that you could substitute in to make the build a little less expensive, because this build is quite expensive as it currently stands. But there are ways to mitigate that just by using certain other items, which I'm going to go over. So just to start off, I'm going to go over the stats of this character. So it does 20k base lightning damage. It has a 75% chance to block, so I'm at max block, and I'll explain more about that later. I've gone quite heavy into dexterity because I wanted to get at max block. My vitality, put all the rest of the points into that, and I upped strength just enough to be able to have the monarch shield that I'm wielding, which is the Phoenix shield. You only need 156 for that. I went to 157 because I have a ring that gives me +1 strength, and I didn't want to be stuck, with that ring where I can't change it out if I want to. In any case, and as you can see, my resistances are 95 fire, 90 cold, 95 lightning, 90 poison. So pretty close to having all of them maxed. I find the cold and poison are less dangerous. Lightning and fire is where most of the damage is going to come from when you're out and about in combat. The other thing is, if you do need to max cold or poison, you can just drink a bunch of cold or poison potions, cold or antidote potions rather, and each time you drink one, it gives you 30 seconds worth of 95% resist on that, and it stacks, so you could drink 30, 40, 50 of them, whatever, and then you're set if you need to. I don't personally find that I ever need to do that, but it is something that you can do. My defense is currently 1576. I do get a bonus from my Merc. So this is a good point. Since this is a Phoenix build, you get your strength from consuming bodies that have, from dead enemies. And if you go with the traditional Merc with the cold aura, a lot of those bodies are going to shatter, and you're not going to be able to take advantage of that. So what you want to actually do is go with a Act 2 Mercenary with a defensive ability, and it's actually going to improve your defense. It's going to up your defense value once you're out and about. The other thing you'll notice is my life is fairly low. It's 1356 base, but I'm making use of Call to Arms, which helps with that. So for instance, I'll show you what the stats look like once I'm out here and I've applied all my auras. So now I've got all my auras on here. So now I'm doing 21k lightning damage. My defense is up to 2679, which will actually, I believe, go up a little higher if he casts. Let me see here. Okay. I think he'll have his defensive aura on now. Yeah, so his defensive aura will up this to 6619, which is great. That's more than enough to deal with most things. And you'll notice that my health is now at 2176, which is a really good amount. So you basically just have to cast these auras every now and then while you're running around, to be able to keep your character boosted, and it gives really nice boosts. And I also have energy shield on, which gives an extra layer. So I'm going to go over all of that in more detail right now. So for my gear, let's go over each piece and basically explain why I chose them. So I have Sandstorm Trek boots. I'm really just taking these for the plus 15 strength and plus 15 vitality. None of the other stats really, are all that important. The 20% faster hit recovery is good, but it's not necessary. And anything to do with stamina doesn't matter because you're just teleporting anyways. For the gloves, I go with the Mage Fist, and that's just specifically for the 20% faster cast rate. In my opinion, if you're a caster, there's really no reason to go with any other gloves. These are the best because of that 20% faster cast rate on them. For the rings, I'm going with two rings that have 10% faster cast rate. The other attributes on them don't really matter all that much. These have like fair attributes. They're not the best, but they're not the worst. Going with a Thunder God's Vigor Warbelt, and I'm going to explain kind of more about why I chose this belt once I get through the rest of these items, just to show you. I'm going with the Phoenix Shield. This is specifically for the level 15 Redemption Aura, which you can actually see on me. It's that swirling red aura that's on. What that does is it will redeem corpses in the area. I believe level 15 gives you 85% redemption. So you're going to get, for each corpse that you redeem, you're going to get a certain percentage of like their health and mana back into your health and mana. And you'll see that in action during the rest of the video where I actually show this character in combat. You'll see that. You'll see the bodies turning into these red wisps that go up into the air, and you'll see that recovers mana and health when that happens. It's super, super handy. It's like having, a never-ending supply of rejuvenation potions, basically, that are just getting automatically applied while you're fighting. It's phenomenal. Some other great things about this shield are that it gives the plus 10% maximum fire resist, and plus 5% maximum lightning resist. And it also has plus 15 fire absorb. Now that's plus 15 points, not plus 15%. In my opinion, plus points are better because they give you the chance to completely negate the damage rather than just blocking a certain percent of it after the damage makes it through the resistances and other things. So the plus 15 fire absorb is very nice. Then for my armor, this is what gives me those really high percentage resist, gets me up to 95, 90%. It's Guardian Angel Templar coat, and it has some other nice features to it. Since I decided to go with max block, it has 30% faster block rate and 20% increased chance of blocking, which actually reduces to some degree the amount of points that need to be put in to get up to a full 75% max block. So it's nice having those additional attributes on there. And other than that, I used an rune in it. That's just to give me that extra 15% for all resistances, or plus 15 to all resistances rather. And then you can see that by default this thing provides plus 15 to all maximum resists, which is pretty godly. It's pretty ridiculous. Obviously the plus 1 to paladin skill levels does nothing for us, but just for those plus 15 to all, it's totally worth it in terms of survivability of the character. Over here I've gone with Wizard Spike, and I've socketed it with a light facet, with a rainbow facet jewel that gives minus 5% enemy lightning resist and plus 5 to lightning skill damage. That doesn't really do a heck of a lot, but I figured why not. It helps a little bit with the damage. That gives a bunch of resistances and also gives you the plus 50% faster cast rate, which is pretty awesome. I was originally using Hoto, but I'll explain why I switched to this shortly. For the helm, Griffin's Eye is really the only way to go in my opinion. It has, to my knowledge, the highest faster cast rate value on any helm that you can get in the game. So 25% faster cast rate, plus one to all skills, which is nice. The big thing is the minus to enemy lightning resistance and the plus to lightning skill damage. So I had a perfect Griffin's Eye. The stats will vary on them, and I put a light facet jewel in it. So that brings me up to minus 25% to enemy lightning resistance and plus 20% to lightning skill damage, which is quite substantial. I'm using a plus 3 to lightning skills amulet with the 10% faster cast rate on it. So just to discuss a little bit why these items were chosen. So the Wizard Spike was chosen because I needed, first of all, I needed as much faster cast rate as I could because I wanted to get up to my 117 breakpoint, which in my opinion is super important, because the more lightning bolts you can put out, the more damage you can do. And 117 cast rate is where you get that next level on your lightning skills. So I wanted to go with to get the faster cast rate past 117, but with the Guardian Angel, that doesn't give any kind of faster cast rate, like, other armor such as a Viper Magi or a Fortitude would give you. Those both give 25 and 30% faster cast rate, but I gave that up by switching to the Guardian Angel, so I needed to make up for that any way I could. So what I ended up doing was the 10% on this, the 25 on that, and then the 50 on this. So that gives me 85 between those items, and then 95, 105, and then 115, 125. So that gets me to my 117 breakpoint between those items there, and I don't have to worry about that on the armor or the shield or anything else providing that. So that extra 50% was quite important. The other great thing about Wizard Spike is that it gives you all resistances plus 75, which is pretty huge, and was pretty important with me getting to my max resistance without having to do a bunch of other things like filling my entire inventory with resistance charms or something like that. So that's why I went that route. In terms of the Thunder God's Vigor, why I chose that, this thing makes the biggest difference when you're fighting spirits, any kind of souls, like in Worldstone Keep, that would normally just murder people and actually still do a fair amount of damage, even if you're at 95% resist. So the big deal here is that this has plus 20 points to Lightning Absorb. So what that means is usually when they attack, your 95% resist, which I'm at, will cut down on a lot of that damage. And then actually a portion of that damage will also end up going to my energy shield, generally, although sometimes energy shield gets stripped away and that doesn't apply. But let's say there's no energy shield and then you're just dealing with this. Well, so 95% comes right off the top. And more often than not, that means you're only left with less than 40 damage being done to you. And then what this will do is, let's say you're left with like 35 damage being done to you. It will basically heal you by 20. So it's going to absorb 20 of that damage, and then it's going to heal you by 20. So it's going to completely negate that damage, and you're actually going to end up healing. So like as you're being attacked by them, you're going to be gaining health rather than losing health, which is obviously great. And then the other point here is because I'm using Phoenix, I have that plus 15 fire absorb. Much the same thing happens with fire attacks. If I'm absorbing a large portion of them, which I will because I'm at 95%, the remaining amount, if it's less than 30 or 30 on the dot, you're going to not be losing health because of that absorb value. So that's super great. It, in most cases, and I mean I can't even remember the last time I came across a case where this wasn't the case. I am essentially fire and lightning immune on this character because of the gear that I'm using. So it's really awesome, the mix of this gear. being able to provide that kind of defense. And lastly, because I'm kind of taking a hit on plus skills by going with the gear that I did. Like for instance, if I had a Hodo instead of a Wizard Spike, I'd be getting +3 to all skills that I'm not getting with this. However, this offers less defense, or sorry, less resistance. It's only +40 instead of +75, and I wanted to get as much as I could from my gear. And it also is only 40% faster cast, and this is 50. So this is pretty essential for this particular setup to go with the Wizard Spike instead of the Hodo. So I'm gonna actually just talk about some gear that you could substitute in if this particular build is too expensive. You could substitute in a Skin of the Viper Magi. You might put an in it, you might not. The just gives it better resist, so you can see we have +50 to all resist. The problem with this is it's so low on defense that I found I was getting, just absolutely destroyed. I'm smacked around a lot with this armor. I needed something with higher defense. Eventually ended up moving over to Fortitude, which has better defense as long as it's in a decent plate. And the nice thing about Fortitude is it gives you some great bonuses. You've got your 25% faster cast rate. You've got your +5 to maximum lightning resist, which makes a big difference on a lightning sorceress. It also gives you all resistances +30. You get some damage taken goes to mana. It has some nice stuff on it. It also gives you some life based on level. So it is a nice piece of armor. I was running with this originally and I was doing quite well. The reason I switched to the Guardian Angel was because I wanted my resists as high as I possibly get them. Because I wanted this character to be, very, very tanky and to be able to take a lot of hits, whether they're elemental or physical. So I went the route of switching to this, and because of that, I had to go with the Wizard Spike and put, 2 10% bands here instead of Stones of Jordan. I could have potentially used Interacted Mesh, but this Thunder Gods makes such a difference when you're dealing with souls or any lightning creatures for that matter. It makes a huge difference, and it's just, I honestly just can't do without it. It makes everything so effortless compared to using this, which would give you that +1 to skills and 20% faster cast rate. But other than that, it really is not as beneficial as this in the long run, especially since I'm a lightning sorceress and I'm going to be having a harder time dealing with lightning enemies generally, because some of them are immune. And so that was why I decided on that first over this. In terms of my charms, I've got a Hellfire Torch and a Nihilist Charm. Mine happen to have perfect stats on them, but you really don't need perfect stats on them. You just get as high to perfect as you can, and then you just make up with it for other charms, with other charms. I've gotten a bunch of +1 lightning skill charms, and I've gone with ones that have + to life. You could just go with standard +1 charms. You don't really need the life boost. It's a nice to have. It's not absolutely required. It gives you end up with like an extra couple hundred health, which I mean honestly could take or leave. It's nice to have. So I've gone with that across the board here. And then down here I've gone with small charms that are +5 to all resist and +20 to life. You could also just do +5 charms with no + to life, like I was saying, which are generally cheaper. So I've gone those across the bottom here. Those help to bring me up to the my max resists. I just needed that extra little bit of boost. So that's 10, 20, 30, 40 extra resist on top of what my gear is giving me. And that's largely because I don't have armor that's giving me additional resists. If you were using Fortitude, for instance, you wouldn't need that many resistance charms. You could probably just get away with like a single 15 charm or something like that, and then put something else there. So another thing I just wanted to go over real quick here is my Mercenary gear. So what I've given him is an affinity. This is really important for Lightning Sorceress. This is pretty much the only way to fly, in my opinion. Some sorceresses use this as their primary on their own character, but I find it's more beneficial to just have this on the on your merc for the most part. The biggest thing this provides is a level 12 conviction aura. And what that does is, as long as a lightning creature's lightning resistance is not 117 or higher, this will break their immunity. The way that works is level 12 conviction aura will normally bring resistances to lightning down by 85% on any creature. So on a creature that's already not lightning immune, it will drop their resistances quite a bit. So it makes them quite a bit easier to kill once they're affected by that aura. So that in itself is important. But sometimes you'll come across creatures that have over 100% resist to lightning, and those are considered immune creatures. Now, conviction still works on immune creatures, but it only works at a fraction of the percentage that it would work on a non-immune. So in this case, at a level 12, you end up reducing the immunity by 17%, not 85%, if a creature is immune. So what that means is if they have 100% resist, you're dropping them down by 17% below that. Now, if they're 117%, you're dropping them down 17. They're still at 100. They're still immune. Or if they're any higher than that, you'll get some guys that are like 130 resist, which is the highest that they can be. You're never going to be able to drop those down and make them non-immune because you're only dropping them by 17. They still have 100 and whatever left over after that. So this is an essential item. It's not going to break all immunities, but it's going to break most of them. And any creatures that you can't break the immunity on, hopefully they won't be also immune to physical, which does happen. You can have immune to lightning and immune to physical, which are extremely annoying. But if they're not immune to physical, you can just let your merc just stab away at them until they're dead. That's what I generally do. It's very rare that you're going to run into that situation, but it does happen. I gave him Fortitude. The big one on this is the plus 300% enhanced damage and plus 200% enhanced defense, which is great for a merc. The plus 130 to life is good. The replenish life, the resistance values, this is just all around great merc gear, great defense on it as well because it's an ethereal. When you're equipping your merc, if possible, go with ethereal items. They do more damage. They have better defense, just better stats usually. I also gave him an Endariel's Visage, and I socketed it with a charm, with a jewel. And the purpose of that jewel is it gives plus 30 to plus 30 to fire resist, because this would by default Andariel's Visage, fire. That's right. By default, Andariel's Visage will reduce fire resistance by 30%, which is not good. That actually makes your merc really squishy when you're fighting fire guys. So you want to counter that. So that's why I did that. You could go with another option, like you could go with with any helm with life steal. Basically, this one has 9% life stolen per hit. The max on Dario's Visage is 10, but you can go with other helms that have life steal as well. It's important to have a little bit of that. Helps to keep your merc alive. An alternate helm that I've also experimented with and works quite well, but it can get a little annoying during runs, is Delirium. This thing is actually kind of like overpowered. If you put this on your merc, anytime they get struck, they have chances to deal, terror, confuse, mind blast, and those will, cause enemies to flee or cause them to attack each other, which takes the heat off of you and is actually very powerful. It almost makes it too easy. In some cases, I don't personally like running with this unless I'm absolutely have to. Like if there's an area where I'm just having a huge amount of problems, I'll throw this on the merc and see if sometimes it'll help out. But generally, I'm just keeping this sitting in my stash and I'm using the Endariels instead. So I've gone through all the stats on this character and kind of explained why I've chosen this gear. So now I'm going to we're going to go into some footage that I captured of this character in action. Um, right before I get into that, I'm just going to explain a few things about how the defense works or how this merc is designed. I'm also going to go over the skills that I'm using. So in terms of skill distribution, I put 1 point into warmth, and I put 1 point into frozen armor, because both of those are decent one pointers that give you some a little bit of an advantage. Um, I don't have many plus points to all points. I'm doing more plus points to lightning specifically on this particular build. So these are kind of low, but they do still help a bit. So I was willing to put those points in there. In terms of lightning skills, I've maxed out lightning mastery, chain lightning, and lightning. I've put 1 point into static field because that's fantastic when you're fighting bosses. If a few shots of that and they're like down to less than half health, and then you can just finish them off. So 1 point into that is super worthwhile. I put 16 points into telekinesis, and 1 point into teleport, 1 point in energy shield. The reason I put the 16 points in telekinesis is because it helps to boost the effectiveness of energy shield. You lose less mana per hit. By default, you're taking I forget the exact amount, but I think it's double. So by default, energy shield is, if you take 500 damage, you're losing 1,000 mana. So it's really ineffective to use energy shield without putting points into telekinesis. At 16 points, it's a 1-to-1 ratio. So 500 is 500 mana, and if you go further than that, if I put another 4 points in there and max it out to 20 hard points in it, then you actually start getting some damage reduction from it, where you're only affecting about 75% of the damage is going toward is taken out of your mana, rather than the 100% that 16 gives you. But 16 is enough for me to make me effective, so I stopped there, and I put the rest of the points into Charge Bolt, because that's a synergy for lightning, obviously, just like Chain Lightning is. And that helps to boost my damage. Charge Bolt is also a fantastic boss killer. If you get up right next to a boss and you just unload Charge Bolts into them, like when you're standing right next to them, and if you can get every Charge Bolt to connect, it is extremely effective in bringing bosses down. So I use this when I'm doing bail runs with other people, and I'll just teleport right on top of them and just do a few static fields and then just start unleashing Charge Bolts on them. So that's why I've chosen this particular build. I'm going to talk a bit about how the layout works in terms of defense. So for physical attacks, and some physicals can be a doozy. Like, for instance, if you run into dolls, they do a lot of explosive damage, but that can be blocked. And I have my max block at 75%, so that means I have a 75% chance of blocking all damage when it all explodes in front of me, which is huge, especially if there's a whole pack of them, because those dolls do crazy damage, especially in a 8-player game, and it can add up very quickly. So even blocking 75% is huge. Now, I mean, you could still end up with some bad rolls and take a whole ton of damage, but I have yet to really have that happen ever since I've gone with max block. I was originally a Vitasource, and I had all my points into Vitality, and while that gave me like an extra, I think it worked out to like 700 health. Actually, not even. I think it was like an extra 550 health or something like that. It was not very effective, and I found that going with the 75% chance to block and taking that penalty to health overall just makes me much tougher. So I mentioned dolls. Another thing, like Stygian Furies, the succubus, the flying women enemies, their attack is physical. A lot of people don't realize that, but it's a physical attack. So having max block, when they're just unleashing a storm of those things on you, and you're not able to necessarily move out of the way in time or whatever, having max block at 75% block is huge, because you're going to block a huge portion of those attacks, and it's going to save you a lot of health in the long run. You're going to see in the video of me running through different types of enemies, I come across groups of those at one point, or at several points in the video, and you'll see how effective it is at blocking. It's quite effective. The way that blocking for physical attacks works is that your block with your shield for a physical attack, the 75% chance to block, takes effect first, and then on top of that, if the physical damage manages to make it through that 75% block, then your energy shield kicks in, and your energy shield takes the remaining damage, or whatever damage it can take based on the amount of mana that you have. So you have, I'm basically working with like layers of protection on this build. I've got the max block, and then I've got the energy shield, and energy shield will actually block, it will also block elemental damage, and it blocks it a certain percentage, whatever percentage based on the shield level. I think I'm blocking, I don't know, like 75, 80%, something like that, will go towards mana. The rest will go towards health. And then when it goes towards health, then your resistances take effect and whittle that down even further. So for instance, if I were to take like a 100 hit for 100 points of lightning, about 80% of that, or whatever percentage I have for my shield would go, and I'd take that hit on mana, and then the rest of it would make it through and would hit my resist. The resist would cut that down to almost nothing, and then the absorbs come into play, where I would be actually absorbing it and then healing myself on top of that. So I've got these multiple layers. I've got the max block for the physical, I've got the energy shield, and then I've got my resistances here, and then my absorbs. So it's like a multi-layered defense approach that is very effective. Another piece of gear that I actually just remembered, I forgot to mention, you're going to want this when you swap over. You're going to want on swap, you're going to want call to arms. This is awesome. What this does is it gives you +2 to battle command and +6 to battle orders. And battle orders will give you improved health and mana based on its level. So this is affected by plus points as well. So I have +6 on called arms, and then my other items are giving me additional plus points, bringing me up to 11. The other skill, battle command, will actually increase. It'll give you +1 to all skills when you cast it, which is really cool. I usually recommend using battle command and then using battle orders after it, because battle command will give you that +1, which will also affect battle orders. So battle orders will actually be +12 by the time it's cast, which gives you some additional health and mana. And then for the shield, I have Spirit, and the only reason I have this here is for the +2 to all skills, because those will affect your battle orders. So having this here on switch is super important, because that gives you those extra +2, and it makes your battle command and your battle orders that much more effective when you cast them. So just to show again, if I were to head out and cast all my auras here, you see how I switch over to this sword, I do my casting, and then I switch back. And so now I've got those great bonuses to my health, to my mana as well. Go up to 900 from about 700 or 600 or whatever I was at before, which is great. I've got my energy shield on, and so yeah. So now what we're gonna do is we'll switch over and watch some video of this character in action, and you'll see what it can do.